My name is Tafazwa from State of the Nation. President Emmerson Mnangagwa's biggest selling point has been the fight against corruption in Zimbabwe. And last week, he officiated the launch of the Anti-Corruption campaign, which was organized by the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission and the National Prosecution Authority of Zimbabwe. In this week's edition, we've invited one of the young and prominent political analysts in Zimbabwe, Mr. Tafazwa, to help us unpack some of the critical questions which have been posed on the fight against corruption in Zimbabwe. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, since its inception, has arrested quite a number of high-ranking officials in the government. But critics have said that these officials are merely rivals of President Emmerson Mnangagwa, and he's using ZAC to get back at them. Is that a true reflection of ZAC?
Oh, certainly that's a misconception completely. Why? Because the first thing is that, there is no credibility to the information that those that have been arraigned before the courts right now by the Zimbabwe Anticorruption Commission are rivals of ZAC, except that this is just malicious creation from, excited society, members of the society and certain particular medias that have a particular agenda, of course. But there is no truth to it that they are rivals of the president. Why? Because firstly, you may also need to know that the reason why they are high-ranking in the party and in the government, for example, in the case of Minister Mfumira, it's simply because of direct appointment by President Emmerson Mnangagwa himself. So assuming that you would have seen them as rivals, there was no need to involve ZAC, and there is certainly never going to be any need to involve ZAC about party processes. Why? Because he appointed them, so simply he would deal with them by simply disappointing them, which is the easiest than going through the ZAC way. So in other words, I'm saying there is no truth that they are being targeted because they are rivals of the president. Secondly, there is no way materially and realistically how a minister of tourism, for example, in the case of Minister Mfumira again, becomes a rival to President Emmerson Mnangagwa. I'm sure in this case, certainly you can see where I'm coming from. There is no reason whatsoever how she becomes a rival to the president. It is because of acts of commission and commission, among others, high-ranking, that are making them a target of the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, not because they are rivals of anybody whatsoever. In any case, you also have the case of, Mr. Tafuma was the former director of state residence. There is no way that person could be a rival to the president, But they've been arrested and they are being arraigned before the court in order to genuinely respond to those issues. So certainly this is not the first time. Even Deng in China, when he started the Anti-Corruption Commission crusade, the anti-corruption crusade, by arresting top officials. People felt he was targeting members of the then Gang of Four, which were mirrored by the wife of Mao Zedong. But what led President Deng to win the war? It was because of the actions that followed after the arrest, which meant that those were not just window dressing measures, but people were arrested and taken to court and proved guilty and sentenced. And not only themselves, including those who were also his lieutenants. But as long as they were found on the wrong side of the law, they, faced the court processes. So certainly that's where we are going.
Okay, so Mr. Mgwadi, just a brief background of the ZAC itself. Since the new dispensation, we understand that the fight against corruption has been a main selling point for the government. And we've seen the previous Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission making arrests against former public officials like former Minister Ignatius Chombo, former Minister Kasukwere. These people were part of the G40 faction, which is said to be against President Emmerson Mnangagwa's political standing. And if you go down to the new Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, people like Priska Mfumira are usually fingered for being G40 members as well. Doesn't that vilify those who criticize the new ZAC board as fighting political wars for the president?
Oh, certainly not at all. Let me just disabuse, the listeners and the viewers and the Zimbabweans in generality. We for far too long we've, registered complaints with authorities about corruption and the pervasive nature in which it has been ratcheted in our society. And there was always going to be measures to stop the rot. And that is why what we are seeing today with the renewed ZAC is the will of the president through ZAC to ensure that we correct the conduct of public officials, including private players, as far as misappropriations, embezzlements, abuse of office, and all other corruptive vices are concerned. I'm sure even on the first day of his inauguration, the first initial inauguration, the president made it very clear that we were no longer going to do business as usual, which means the previous way of conducting things or business where you would target your political opponent, that is not part of the new dispensation, it's not part of the new order.
Okay.
But now what you need to know is that it doesn't then matter that whether somebody loves the president so much or hates the president so much, loves the new political dispensation that's there so much, or doesn't. When it comes to corruption, there is no smoke without fire. So certainly when you were involved in one way or the other in corruptive vices, the law was always going to certainly catch up with you. It doesn't matter when the law comes, today or tomorrow, certainly the law will come and catch up with you. And that is what we're seeing happening. So, and that is also why the president dissolved the old commissioners under ZAC, and then they put a new ZAC led by Justice Matanda Moyo. And the good thing is that we are having this ZAC led by a person who has also been in the judicial system and is pretty aware of the fault lines that were there, which led certain corrupt pundits to escape the law using flimsy technical issues before the courts. So certainly what we are seeing with this new ZAC is that things are happening according to procedure, arrests are happening procedurally and lawfully, and investigations are also taking place timeously and lawfully without any violations to the targeted persons. That is why the new ZAC has been moving smoothly. And also added to that, the president's decision to give ZAC arresting powers, which were in contestation in the previous, old ZAC before it was dissolved. So certainly that's what we are seeing.
All right.
Now that Minister Chombo was arrested, and then Xavier Gasquero was arrested and escaped borders, and people like Mzembe have become fugitives of justice, it doesn't make them saints. Whether they are opposing President Emerson Mnangagwa or not, that doesn't exonerate them from the acts they committed, which some of them are in the public glare. They must be submitted into the scrutiny of the supreme law of the land, which they are however dodging. But I can promise you that the net will close on them.
All right, so there's also another issue where people are saying ZAC is going against small fish in a pond full of big fish who are funding corruption. Because when we talk about corruption in Zimbabwe, we are obviously talking about those in public office misusing public funds. So people are probably saying, no, the Minister of Tourism and Hospitality is just a small fish who is being sacrificed to make a statement.
Before you go any further, I don't see where a cabinet minister for that thing becoming a small fish. How small is a cabinet minister? How small a fish is she, assuming they were fish? The corruption dragnet does not care whether you are a small or a big fish or an average fish or no fish at all. It targets an individual according to their acts of commission or omission in the exercise of their duty as public officers. So if they transgressed the law, abused public office, and were involved in acts of primitive accumulation, then certainly there is no reason whatsoever how they would then say maybe they are being targeted because they are small fish or big fish. There are no they are no small or big fish at all. In fact, there are no fish at all. They are individuals before the law, and the law must take its course. The cardinal point and framework of our constitutional organization as a country, or constitutional democracy as a country, is that there is no person who is above the law, whether a small or big or what. You are all equal before the law. So when ZAC is coming to you, it's not because you have been considered so small before the law, but it is out of the basis of what you were involved in. And then you also have cases where people are involved in speculative justice, where people say, no, this one is a big fish, he must be arrested by ZAC. ZAC has been magnanimous enough. They've been also very flexible. They say, bring your evidence. If you were involved in a case of corruption with them, bring the evidence. If you know what they did, bring the evidence, bring it, so that it will be used before the law. So it is the duty of every citizen of Zimbabwe to cooperate and work with the Zimbabwe Anticorruption Commission to realize a corruption-free society. So it doesn't matter whether you have a small or a big fish.
Okay, so speaking of public officials, you know, ZAC has started its anti-corruption barrage against those who are holding or those who held public office. You know, these people are powerful people. They are people with influence to either evade arrests tactically or to use sheer force to make sure that they won't get arrested. Is ZAC well equipped enough to make sure that they deal with these people? Because recently on social media we saw officers going against the former vice president Pelekezela Mpoko, but they ended up being turned away because he is a person who's powerful, of course. So is ZAC ready to go against every person, whether big or small, in society?
The president has made it very, very clear and vivid that the new ZAC has teeth, and he meant it. And what we have seen in the couple of weeks after this new ZAC was appointed is action, and that's what we wanted. Of course, there is no society that does not have its own fair share of rogue elements. And the former vice president, Pelekezela Mpoko, unfortunately, has also chosen to be part of those rogue elements, which is quite unfortunate. He would have wanted to be treated with kid gloves simply because he's a former vice president. He would have expected ZAC to apply to arrest here. That is not how the law operates. So certainly, of course, like I'm saying, every society has its own fair share of rogue elements. And it's unfortunate that in Zimbabwe we are having a former vice president becoming a part of those rogue elements. But I have no doubt that ZAC will teach them a lesson according to the law, and underline according to the law. So it does not also follow that Vice President Mpoko was involved in what he was involved with, dodging the law, and then it would then say maybe every top element in the party or in government or in society will be involved in that. Some have been cooperating, and which is one thing that I applaud Mme Fumira for. Whether she was involved or not, the court will decide, but certainly I applaud her for having answered the call of the law. And she is incarcerated lawfully, which is what we would want from all other top accolades in society, whether in the party or in the private sector. Mind you, top accolades are not only found in the party or government, we also have top accolades in the private sector, in the civil society, even in opposition ranks, who are also involved in corrupt activities. And ZAC has made it very clear that it is pursuing everyone in society. Whether you received some millions from the Americans, purportedly perhaps for regime change activities or so, and then you chose to abuse the money, again, you will not escape the ZAC's dragnet. So certainly, it doesn't matter once again about which rank you have in society. You will have to answer to the call of the law. And I'm glad ZAC has been quite very clear about that. And they've been executing their responsibility smartly and timelessly, without any hasks, but without any delay as well.
Okay, so still on the issue of top officials, we've had a number of those who are still holding power being said to be under the radar of ZAC. For example, we speak of people like Mr. Obet Mpofu, who's recognized as one of the most powerful politicians in Zimbabwe. So in your view, should people have confidence in ZAC as the answer to dealing with corruption, whether it's being driven by big people or small people or those in the private sector in the society?
Oh, firstly, let me disabuse you on that one. I don't know of a powerful Obed Mpofu in Zimbabwe. In fact, if there was any individual to be powerful or to be described as such in Zimbabwe, then that would be the Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, who is also the President, His Excellency President Emerson Mnangagwa. And I don't think there is any other powerful creature under the sun in planet Zimbabwe who is so powerful than him, assuming we were to describe individuals in those terms. So certainly, I'm simply saying I don't know how Obed Mpofu is powerful. What I know is that he's the secretary of, for administration of the ruling party, but that doesn't make him any powerful at all. He does have power, yes, but power to exercise according to what he would have been instructed by the Politburo of the party, and most importantly by his appointing authority, who is the president. So he's not powerful. Now that, coming to the issue of whether he is implicated or ZAC is after him, I'm not privy to the information that the Zimbabwe Anticorruption Commission is after Comrade Obed Mpofu. If it is, I'm sure it is still within the province of their responsibility to confirm and explain how much they are after him and for what crimes they are after him or allegations they are after him. So far I'm not privy to that, and I would not comment on that, except to say that if there is any issue with Comrade Obed Mpofu, and any other person in the party, like what we've seen with Ms. Mfumina. Certainly you would expect the Zimbabwe Anticorruption Commission to arrest him, and I'm sure Obed Mpoko is a full-time employee of the party, and that means he's supposed to be found at ZANU-PF 24/7, 7 days a week, and perhaps 365 days a year. So I don't see how he could be said to be a fugitive of justice when he's just a stone throw away from ZAC offices.
Okay.
Most importantly, it will also be good to, to say that, when it comes to, people that have not been arrested or whose criminal offenses or allegations have not been confirmed by ZAC, it will be, a prejudice to comment on their issues before their issues have been submitted before ZAC.
Okay.
What we just saw maybe were allegations coming out of, I don't know whether there were convictions, genuine convictions of the Youth League or hot air. You may not be quite sure about that. But yes, allegations were raised by the Youth League, and the parties also taking it through the commission that was appointed by the president to deal with the matter in the party. But that does not also stop ZAC from carrying out its activities and carrying out its functions against Mr. Mpoko if it is any tangible evidence that he was involved wrongly with the law.
Okay, so to wrap up our discussion, what's your general view on the events and efforts that have been done by ZAC so far to try and uproot corruption in Zimbabwe?
In fact, ZAC must be applauded by all sober-thinking Zimbabweans. It must be applauded, and every Zimbabwean of will, every patriot, every person who wants to see the cancer of corruption removed from our society must take it upon themselves to cooperate with ZAC and become an agent of anti-corruption campaign. Even journalists, media houses, individuals, politicians, rather than to cast unnecessary aspersions into the process altogether. Arrests were going to come, and they were to start from somewhere. Misconceptions, yes. Suspicions, yes. Of course, misgivings from society, yes. But certainly, all those that you think have issues with the law that ZAC must look into, please bring the evidence before ZAC. If I heard, I would take it as a citizen. Despite being a political analyst, I would not ignore the scourge of corruption, because we have had to lose billions of dollars in corrupt leakages because of the conduct of our government officials, because of those manning public institutions. So certainly, it is our responsibility as a people to work with the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission to stop casting unnecessary aspersions, to stop casting unnecessary doubts in whatever that the Anti-Corruption Commission is doing. The fight against corruption can only be successful if you participate. The responsibility to fight corruption is a shared responsibility. It is not of Justice Matandamoy alone. It is not of that of fellow commissioners alone. It is not of investigating officers alone. It is also a public responsibility. Yourselves, myself, us together can help get rid of the scourge of corruption and ensure that public officials, even private officials, in the conduct of their duties, whether privately or publicly, they must exercise due diligence and avoid themselves from crossing the path of the law, so that they would think one day they will escape, because they would start casting aspersions that were being targeted for one or two reasons. That's not it. So even those in the opposition, they must stand warned. Those in the civil society who receive, forex to destabilize government and then end up abusing, those funds, even the law is coming to catch on them. And I'm just repeating the words of Justice Matandamoy. So certainly no one is immune when it comes to the war on corruption. Of course, the ZAC will lose certain battles, but overall, I bet my last dollar, the conduct so far shows that they are going to win overall the war.
Okay. So there you have it, Zimbabwe. Those were the discussions we were having with our political analyst, Mr. Tafazo Mgwadi.